Have you ever been to a national park in the United States? National parks originate from US President Woodrow Wilson's enactment of the Organic Act in 1916, which was meant specifically for natural areas that were undeniably beautiful and should be kept so for generations on. Since I started climbing, my mind has been filled with desires of climbing in some of these parks around the United States, like Yosemite, Grand Teton, Black Canyon of the Gunnison. I know all those areas, I've seen them all over social media and documentaries. But what about the parks outside the US? To figure this out, I went to Mexico in the city of Querétaro, and in this video, I'm going to tell you what I learned from my journey. I don't know about most people, but I've never heard the stellar rock that I must be climbing in Mexico. I started to ask around, and other people didn't know either, so I started to do some research. Okay, so far what I know about La Peña de Bernal is, well, I don't know anything. There are a ton of sport routes that are bolted there. From what I understand, it's one of the biggest monoliths that there is in the world, but I've never heard about it. I came across the headline of one of the world's tallest monoliths based just 45 minutes outside the town of Querétaro in the nearby town of Bernal. The walls seemed tall, the area accessible, and it held a variety of route styles and grades, seemingly internationally recognizable potential. This monolith is called La Peña de Bernal. To gain some more info, I contacted a local climbing guide named Michael, and after a couple months of communicating via WhatsApp, Michael and I planned a time and date to sit down and talk about the monolith.
El concepto, según los biólogos, es que la Peña de Bernal era un antiguo volcán. Es un volcán que no hizo erupción o que su núcleo principal no llegó a hacer explosión.
La Peña stands at a prominence of 1,150 feet, which is comparable to some of the other largest monoliths in the world, like Uluru in Australia and Benamera in Mauritania. But its steep vertical walls are what defines the difference between La Peña de Bernal and other freestanding monoliths.
En Peña de Bernal te puedes encontrar una ruta de 6, de 8 largos, donde su nivel máximo 510A. Entonces realmente encontrarte una ruta de 300 metros que su nivel máximo sea 6A más, discúlpame, no lo hay en todo lugar. Y Bernal lo tiene.
Although it seemed like there was a significant amount of development, there wasn't any strong community of climbers based in Bernal in the city itself. So I couldn't help but wonder, why is there no strong community of climbers in the town of Bernal?
¿Por qué creo que quizás no hay muchos escaladores en Bernal? La Peña, en sentido general, para las personas de Bernal es como un lugar mágico, es un lugar místico, es una fuente de energía. Pero en un sentido lo ven no como algo que tiene un potencial deportivo, sino más bien lo ven como un lugar histórico, místico y demás. Previo a ese tiempo ya había lo que se conoce como la Ruta de las Grapas. La Ruta de las Grapas sería quizás en Europa algo similar a una vía ferrata, pero no tiene las normativas de una vía ferrata. Es lo que actualmente ocupan se le llaman escaloneros. Son las personas que cada ciertas fechas en el año bajan una de las dos cruces que están en la cima, la traen hasta el centro del pueblo en lo que le llaman la Capilla de la Santa Cruz, y en otra fecha vuelven a subir la cruz hasta la cima, también por la Ruta de las Grapas. Creo que hay potencial para desarrollar mucho más la escalada, al punto de que sea un destino no solamente nacional, sino realmente un destino internacional. Y me llama mucho la atención, he escalado con clientes de Francia, de España, de Alemania, Inglaterra, y muchos de ellos me dicen, ¿sabes qué? No tenía ni idea que este lugar existía. Y para mí es como que, ¿en serio?
To find more about why this place hasn't been recognized within the worldwide climbing community, I needed to do some research into the history of La Peña de Bernal and ultimately the history of Mexico. La Peña de Bernal is divided into multiple sections, some of which is owned by the government, where tourists from around the world go to hike up the south face, and the other half is known as Chichido, which is privately owned and is not government operated. To understand why, we need to go back in time a little. In 1917, the Mexican Constitution established this form of designating land ownership called Article 27. Article 27 established what is called an ejido, and an ejido is a complex and complicated topic to understand, but what you need to know is that it mimics that of a long-used Aztec land tenure system, and it doesn't act like private property. It can't be bought, rented, or sold, at least not until later. Throughout the 60s and the 70s, Mexico experienced a rapid growth in its population, and ejidos weren't able to keep up with agricultural production. So in 1991, Mexican President Carlos Salinas proposed the deletion of Article 27 to Congress, which ultimately made ejidos eligible to be bought, sold, or rented. Okay, that was a lot, but let's bring this knowledge back to La Peña de Bernal. We can see that at one point, half of the monolith had been established as an ejido during the time of land dissemination and bought for private use. I needed to get the perspective of some other local climbers, and from Michael, it was clear the climbing community of Bernal isn't even based in Bernal. So I diverted my attention back to the city, more specifically to the first officially established climbing gym in Querétaro, El Muro.
Bueno, yo me llamo Damián López, soy sobrino del marciano, que es el dueño del muro. Yo no estuve cuando se construyó realmente, pero sé que todo está hecho a mano. A raíz del COVID, básicamente estaba cerrado. Yo empecé a venir con mi hermano y de pronto empezamos a traer amigos a escalar. Simplemente vimos que había demasiado potencial aquí como para dejarlo cerrado. Es un beneficio para la comunidad el hecho de que haya lugares así, que realmente buscamos que la gente no solo aprenda a escalar, sino como que sea más consciente con el ambiente, con el entorno, con la naturaleza, con todo.
I met some locals here and there, but for the most part ended up climbing alone for the first 2 weeks, until I happened to show up at El Muro on a Thursday night.
Hacían un jueves de muro, es súper famoso, ¿no? Donde pues sí, después del entrenamiento se echaban unas chelas y hacían el plan de la escalada del fin de semana.
After that first Thursday night, it became an every weekend event of climbing in Bernal and another local zone called Tepuzas. Although not as big as La Peña, Tepuzas has around 100 different single pitch routes of varying grades and styles, and as of recent years, it's received more attention from the local community to develop more routes. As we climb more together, I began to immerse myself within the community and hear their perspectives on climbing in parks in Mexico and how it's different than climbing in parks in the United States.
A diferencia de Estados Unidos, y la diferencia pues es el desarrollo. O sea, estamos en pañales, ¿no? En Querétaro, en México. Es muy pobre la cultura de la escalada en México. En la zona, tú tienes que hacer caminos, tú tienes que cuidar, ¿no? Tú tienes que marcar, tú tienes que poner letreros, tú tienes que educar a la comunidad, ¿no? Tuve la oportunidad, por ejemplo, de conocer Yosemite, que es toda es una ciudad. Hay policía, hay todo, ¿no? En ese parque. Como lo está haciendo Chichido, de las pocas zonas, ¿no? Privadas en Querétaro que se les da de escalada. Camping seguro, tienes baños, tienes cocina, mantenimiento a las rutas.
The answer as to why La Peña de Bernal isn't more well known within the worldwide climbing community remains complex. But the benefits of having a privately owned area on one of the world's tallest monoliths in Mexico may still prove itself to be valuable to the local climbing community and the worldwide climbing community.
Y yo siempre estuve a favor de que se cobrara la entrada mientras le dieran mantenimiento. Como es un área privada, te da la seguridad de que puedes acampar ahí y vas a estar totalmente seguro.
Sí, creo que es importante el hecho de cómo cuidemos las zonas de escalada. Es importante tener un lugar cuidado, así como un parque nacional en Estados Unidos, ¿no? Por ejemplo, ¿no? Ya es demasiada gente la que va a visitarlo y sí tiene que haber un control.
y puede ser una relación de ganar-ganar, ¿no? De, ok, ellos pues sí tienen un beneficio monetario en este caso y nosotros como escaladores en este caso podemos entrar y escalar allí y ellos mantienen el área limpia, baños secos, ese tipo de cosas que apoyan a la comunidad y que mantienen como las cosas un poco en balance.
As time passes and people find out what is in this whole area of North America, I see La Peña de Bernal becoming one of the more well-known monoliths to climb, let alone the third biggest monolith to climb in the world. I want to give a special thanks to the community of El Muro for all that they've done for me and my host family back in Querétaro and everyone who helped me out along the way. Making this production was really fun and I hope to make more stuff in the future.